We hugged and he moved towards his room and I started moving towards the gate. When he suddenly turned around, walked briskly up to me, kissed me on my cheek, gave me a tight hug, and then walked back again. Now my son is an adult, so there is nothing remarkable in this whole thing. My son is also autistic, what we call minimally verbal, and that too does not make it remarkable. What does make it remarkable is the fact that when he was identified as autistic as a child, and later on as well, I was told by professionals as well as the literature of the time that my son was a cold, emotionless being. That he was a person who did not understand the meaning of love. That he was not aware of me as his mother or as his parent. And, when you listen to professionals, you think, they're probably correct. Because my son never came and hugged me. When I hugged him, he kind of would move away. If I left the house on an errand, he did not seem to notice that I was leaving. If I was unwell, it did not seem to bother him. And so I thought, what they say is correct. And I bought into this whole myth of lack of empathy that dogs the autistic population even now. Though autistic people have been around for as long as there have been people, and incidentally in this room today, there would be 2 or 3 autistic people, whether they are aware of it or not, and each one over here has at least one individual with autism in their circle. Given the prevalence, autism took a long time to get into the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Association or into the ICD-10 of WHO either. But having gotten there, if you look at the latest version of the DSM, that's the 5th version that was released in 2013, you will learn of all the deficits and abnormality that the DSM-5 states that autistic people have. And what are these? These are deficits in social reciprocity, deficits in communication, deficits in maintaining relationships, stereotypical behaviors, restricted interests, abnormal focus. Now, when you read this manual, whether as a parent or as a professional, you automatically come to view autistic people as faulty human beings. And that perception continues to be propagated, that autistic people are difficult, they have problem behaviors, and the focus of families and professionals of society, and for that matter for policymakers too, is to make them behave normally. If you have to be in our society, you have to be normal. So shows like My Name is Khan or The Good Doctor, they romanticized autism and gave it a certain amount of visibility, but they have not really affected perceptions around the condition. Now, at Action for Autism, as a professional body of people, some of us also are parent professionals, our work is grounded on the philosophy of acceptance of all, but particularly of autistic people, as that is the population that we focus on, of not judging autistic behaviors as bad, on focusing on trying to figure out what makes them tick, of trying to understand what drives them. However, while we presumed with great arrogance that we were open and inclusive, we were also susceptible to what research was telling us. Research that was often eugenic in nature and saw autistic people as flawed beings who needed to be stopped from being born or to be changed so as to be better and like us normal people. We began incorporating a lot of the behavioral methods in our work, which essentially was about manipulating individuals with rewards and punishment based on a completely superficial understanding without taking into account the feelings and emotions that were there behind their actions. Now, because respect of autistic people was intrinsic to our work, in time we started getting uncomfortable about what we were doing, and we began to question our actions. And through the last many years, that questioning set us on a path of rethinking, introspecting, and evolving in our understanding of autism. As practitioners who support autistic people in navigating our world, it brought the realization that, among other things, we cannot base what we do, we cannot base our practice on what the DSM-5 tells us, because that description has been devised by non-autistic people, highly qualified and well-meaning, but judging experiences through a non-autistic lens. It's a bit like the Britishers coming to India 400 years back, seeing us eating with our fingers, and then viewing us as disgusting, uncivilized barbarians. Did that really make us uncivilized natives? No, because when the Britishers got here, our civilization was wonderfully culturally rich, but completely different from theirs. And that is exactly how we view autistic differences from our perspective as bad and wrong and needing change. Stop that echolalia. Look at me when you are speaking. Will you stop that dreadful rocking? It's immensely annoying. When a child does not want to go to a birthday party, we use behavioral methods to force them to attend. Because every kid enjoys birthday parties. Children should go to birthday parties. That's how they will become normal. Regardless that the child finds the noise in a typical birthday party unbearably painful, and the confusion and the demands of a birthday party, which non-autistic kids revel in, are actually overwhelming for them. And when the ensuing stress of being at that party leads to a meltdown, we then punish the child. As for non-speaking autistic people, they don't speak, they don't understand anything, and really they have nothing to say. 2 years back, a quiet thing happened in India that turned this belief on its head. Talking Fingers, a slim volume was published in which every contributor is a non-speaking autistic person, each of whom had a great deal to say. And then, of course, on the other hand, we have people who are fluent communicators and who struggle with a different kind of expectation. They struggle to make meaningful small talk, which is so dear to us non-autistic people. But they struggle with that. And if they don't want to participate in small talk, or they are not able to, they're labeled as standoffish. They have to pretend to enjoy loud office parties. Because if they don't, then they're seen as antisocial and ostracized in the office environment. As a population that hates lying and finds it difficult to lie, they find it hard to get it when their father, for instance, says, "So lovely to see you," to a cousin that the father actually hates. And they might innocently end up saying, "But Dad, you said you hated him," and then be seen as a troublemaker. These are individuals who are honest, straightforward, direct, too direct for our devious society, and they spend a lifetime pretending to be something that they are not, merely in order to survive, leading to extremely high levels of anxiety. Unsurprisingly, autistic psychologist Temple Grandin had famously said that she feels like a person from Mars who'd been let loose on planet Earth and is struggling to understand the alien culture. So then, what can we do to change the way we view autistic people? How do we understand the culture of autism? For too long, we have listened to non-autistic voices telling us what it means to be autistic. It is time to start listening to autistic voices in order to understand what being autistic is. And that is really what helped us as an organization, listening to the growing community of autistic self-advocates, as well as having autistic people as colleagues and friends. We live in rather exciting times when we not only have autistic voices from Japan and Australia and England and the US, we have indigenous autistic voices, Indian autistic voices, telling us what their experiences are. And what they tell us is that autistic people perceive the world, experience the world, and interact with their environment in ways that are unique. They think differently, they communicate differently, they are passionate about subjects of their interest, not restricted. Their focus is not abnormal, their deep focus often leading them to excel. It's not that they cannot learn. They have different learning styles which we don't try to understand. And these are learning styles that often make them teach themselves calculus and quantum physics just for fun, and even languages without ever having been taught. They have different sensory experiences, hearing the loudest sounds very softly, and then vice versa, and responding intensely to textures, and often having synesthesia. Being autistic is being different, not less. And that is because their brains are wired differently. They are neurologically different. They are neurodivergent people versus the large majority of people who are neurotypical. It is astonishing that autistic people have been described by scholars as lacking empathy because they do not understand non-autistic people. Yet we, the neurotypical, who pride ourselves on our empathy, have complete lack of empathy towards autistic people, making very little effort to understand them. Understanding is the beginning, but understanding alone is not enough. We have to provide accommodations. One autistic employee functions better, perhaps, if they are sitting in a corner where there is less movement. A student finds it easier to control his impulses if sitting away from an open window. A little one keeps a card with the word wait written on it in front of her so that she knows what is expected of her. An accountant prefers to receive internal discussions in writing over email. These are not tall asks. And a few schools and workplaces ensure that these accommodations are provided. But too often, accommodations are either not provided or they are discontinued after a period of time. We reduced the level of noise in your room for 2 months. Now you can manage, you should have got used to it. Or you had that corner for a year. Why can't you sit in the common area and work like everybody else does? If someone is a wheelchair user, we will ensure that there is a ramp, always. If we have deaf participants, we will ensure that there are sign language interpreters, always. It would not occur to us to say, okay, from tomorrow, no ramps, no sign language interpreters. But that is what happens with autistic people. No one has trouble with the sound. Why should we keep giving you noise-cancelling headphones? Or, there is nothing wrong with your hands. Your hands are perfectly fine. Why can't you write? No, you're not going to get a computer. Because autism is invisible and it has no physical markers, there is deep resistance to providing reasonable accommodation. The expectation always is act normal, meaning become non-autistic, become something that they cannot, but only try and pretend to be, leading to severe anxiety and stress. Autistic persons flourish when information is visual and not only auditory. Reference our airports and our malls, which have realized that visual information benefits us all. But it's like a lifeline for most autistic people. They flourish when there is consistency, when there is routine, when there is order and structure in their everyday lives, when there is predictability, when there is respect for diversity. As a parent of an autistic son who struggles to fit in and therefore had always had behaviors that are conventionally labeled as challenging, yes, that did make things difficult for me. But I belong to the majority. I live in a world that understands my challenges, understands my battles, that empathizes with me. My son, he belongs to a minority and lives in a world that does not understand him and has zero empathy for him. If my life is hard, my son's life is 10 times harder. Autistic people need allies to find their rightful place as citizens of the country. And for that, we, the neurotypical, who are the majority, will have to stop forcing them to become like us and instead embrace the diversity that autism brings so that our world continues to be the richly diverse and amazing place that we want it to be.